Okay, so welcome to this week's of biology tutoring. We're going to be going over evolution. So the introduction to evolution is in biology, evolution is the change of characteristics in a species that can change over time. And this theory stemmed from Charles Darwin that states that evolution came from natural selection. Individuals will basically adapt the characteristics that aid their survival, such as finding food, fighting predators, and resisting disease. Then the individual will pass those genes on to their children. Continuing on, species that poorly adapt to their environment will be less likely to survive and reproduce, and the characters from evolution can give a species an advantage over other species. There are several different types of evolution that we're going to go over. The first one is convergent evolution, and convergent evolution is when different organisms independently evolve similar traits. For example, sharks and dolphins might look different, but their characteristics are completely different. Sharks lay eggs, while dolphins are mammals that use echolocation to find food. Second is coevolution, which occurs when the evolution of two species happens that is mutually beneficial to one another. For example, flowers and bees. Flower plants have adapted the traits of bright colors, stripes, and patterns that are specific to attract the bee's attention. Also seen in the hummingbird in the left picture, its beak has co-evolved with the tubular flower it pollinates. The beak and the flower are the perfect fit. Next is adaptive radiation, which occurs when the species genetically mutates to successfully spread into their environments. For example, with Charles Darwin studies of birds on the Galapagos Islands, their beaks change to take over advantage of the variety of foods available.
Natural selection is the process of how populations of living organisms change and adapt. In a population, individuals are naturally different from each other. This creates variation, which leads to certain individuals naturally having better suited traits for that environment. These traits can benefit them in many ways, like giving them camouflage or better hunting attributes. The individuals that have these traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, slowly making them the majority, if not the entire population. Examples of natural selection. The dark peppered moths were an example of natural selection. At first, the dark peppered moths were rare in the population as light moths had better camouflage on trees and were less likely to be eaten by birds. Then, as the forests were polluted by factories, the trees became darker. This shifted the advantage to dark peppered moths as they now had the better suited traits for the environment. This led to the population of moths darkening over time.
Next, we're going to be going over common descent. Common descent is when one species is the ancestor of two or more species later in time. If two organisms share a recent common ancestor, they are said to be closely related. Some examples include, but are not limited to, teeth exhibited by chickens, back flippers of bottlenose dolphins, and the appearance of hind limbs in whales. The theory of common descent states that all living organisms are descendants of a single ancestor. This theory helps us understand the reason species live in different geographical regions and exhibit different traits. Scientists often use diagrams known as phylogenetic trees and cladograms in order to hypothesize the evolution of various organisms and shared common descent.
Human evolution is a process of change by which people originate from ape-like ancestors. Scientific evidence shows that physical and behavioral traits of people originated from ape-like ancestors and evolved over approximately 6 million years. Humans are primates. Physical and genetic similarities show that the modern human species, Homo sapiens, has a very close relationship to another group of primate species, the apes. One of the earliest human-defining traits, bipedalism, the ability to walk on two legs, evolved over 4 million years ago. Other important human characteristics, such as the large and complex brain, the ability to make and use tools, and the capacity for language, developed more recently. Many advanced traits, including complex symbolic expression, art, and elaborate cultural diversity, emerged mainly during the past 100,000 years.
Oh, and these are our works cited. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back, Team Physics here. We have a new member with us, Maxwell.
And today is week 11. Today we'll be going over simple machines.
So what is physics? Physics is a science that studies motion and behavior of objects through space and time, and related entities of energy and force. Using physics, people can accurately predict trajectories of projectiles. For example, scientists at space programs need to use physics to determine the optimal path for a rocket.
So here are some of the topics that we've already reviewed in our first unit, which I would consider titled motion so far. So we've gone over scalars and vectors, vector mass and weight, force, speed and velocity, yada, yada, yeah. So I'm thinking that maybe on our next physics lesson, we could go over some of these topics all really quickly in like a cram sort of lesson.
So what you will need to continue this course. So it would be preferable if you have pencil, paper, and graphing calculator. And maybe you need to know basic mathematical operations, and it would be nice if you know some trig as well.
But once again, yeah, physics can be difficult sometimes. I don't think we'll be going that complex, though. It'll be some pretty basic stuff. So if you ever get stuck on any part of our lesson, you can always go over the recording of the lessons. And if you have any further questions, I linked like a Google form down below right here. I think you should be able to access it, or you can, where you can like basically input any questions that you have. And if you guys see this and put in questions, we'll try to get back to you on our next lecture.
So what are simple machines? Simple machines make work easier. There are few or no moving parts, and they work by changing the direction of force or the amount of force needed to do something. So today we'll be going over 6 basic types of simple machines.
These are the lever, wheel and axle, pulley, inclined plane, wedge, and screw. So a lever. So the lever is made up of a really straight, rigid object like a board or bar that pivots on a turning point called a fulcrum. We call this a fulcrum, the point on which a lever rests or is supported and on which it like pivots, which means turns on. So levers make work easier by using leverage, which multiplies the force. So when you use a lever, you move a smaller force a longer distance in order to move a larger You move a smaller force a longer distance in order to lift a load a short distance. So examples of these are like, the seesaw right here. I'm sure you guys have played on one before. Pliers and crowbars, tweezers. Here we have like a wheelbarrow. Here's the fulcrum. Here's the lever, and we use this to pivot, and like this pivot point uses it to carry like a lot of heavy stuff that ordinarily you wouldn't be able to carry it by yourself, right? So yeah, here is a GIF that I found, right? This is another example of the pivot point. This is where the lever turns, and by moving it a larger distance, we're able to like move or carry something that what we would normally be unable to carry, right? Like this large boulder.
So wheel and axle. A wheel axle is another simple machine, and it basically uses a wheel with a rod fixed to the middle to help it lift or move loads. In some cases, the machine works like a lever to multiply force. In other cases, it used to move objects easier, such as wheels on a bicycle. A great example is cars, which basically use wheels and axles as a fundamental way of basically transporting about like a ton of weight.
So next is the pulley. A pulley is a type of a simple machine that uses a wheel with a groove, which is like a long, narrow, specific like cut into it for the rope. So like the rope fits into this groove on the wheel, and on one end of the rope, there's like one load, and then you pull on the other end. But in this case, we have like a tiny, smaller one, So this pulley helps you move this load or like change the direction of the force. Yeah. That's basically it. A pulley can help move things from high to low. A pulley has a wheel. This helps us change the direction of the force.
Yeah. Some examples of pulleys include cranes, flagpoles, and window blinds. Here's a GIF I found of a pulley where if you're having trouble lifting something and I don't know, you want to lift this thing a meter up, but obviously your arms are like noodles and you can't pick it up. So here we have a wonderful case of a pulley. We use this interesting device to carry up something heavier with this unique method. Okay, next.
So an incline plane is a flat surface with one end higher than the other. This allows for heavy objects to slide up to a higher point rather than be lifted. It's generally easier to slide something than to lift it. Examples of incline planes include slides and ramps. A great example is this man rolling up incline plane tower. So it shows how, although you have to travel a longer distance, it makes the
Wait, did you cut out? I can't hear if you're talking or not.
Where did I cut out?
Oh, okay, wait, just keep going. You got this. Are you done?
Yeah, I was done.
Okay. So next is the wedge. So if you put two inclined planes back to back, which is, this thing, you get a wedge. So a wedge is a simple machine used to push two objects apart. For example, on the right here, we have an image, very pixelated image of a hatchet. And a hatchet is a single-handed tool with a sharp blade on one side. And we use this, this hatchet, you could use it to cut and split wood. And the other side is a hammerhead. So examples of this wedge include knives, chisels, axes. And here I put down a GIF of a man using a wedge to cut a log in half in obviously real time. So basically, wedge is a simple machine. We use this to split things in half.
So lastly, we have a screw. A screw is a special kind of incline plane, and it's basically an incline plane wrapped around a pole. Screws can be used to lift things or hold them together. Example of screws include spiral staircases, swivel chairs, jar lids, and of course, standard screws, which are used to basically connect two pieces of wood or anything.
Lovely. Okay, and last is our additional video.
So, the building.
Oh Lord, I couldn't play it in the presented mode, so give me 1 second to open it up in YouTube. Which, by the way, I found this really cute kit, and he's really good at explaining all the 6 types of simple machines. So I thought you guys would enjoy this as well.
Someone and something must have made it, right? Nowadays, people use cranes, but what did people use before those cranes even existed? There are 6 types of simple machines: the wheel and axle, the inclined plane, the wedge, a lever, the pulley, and the screw. We're going to be learning about all 6 of them today. So here we go. First off, the wheel and axle. If you have a toy car or a real car, then you should know how they look. Now I salvaged a toy car for its pullback motor like Linus. So right here. And they have a very simple wheel and axle configuration. The wheel is right there, and this is the axle. The wheel turns or rotates to make the vehicle move sideways, forwards, or backwards. The axle keeps the 2 wheels here one. Well, they're still wheels though. Sometimes the axle is called a rod. Wheels help people a lot because they make it easier to move things and move themselves too. Imagine your rolling backpack without wheels. You'd have to drag it all the way, or carry it with your shoulder or something. still. Second, the inclined plane, or sometimes called a ramp. Now, you may already know what a ramp
Hey,
looks
yo,
like.
wait, hold up. This is not matched up.
So, the building you're living in. Second, the inclined plane, or sometimes called a ramp. Now, you may already know what a ramp looks like. So, they're, for example, in skate parks, racing games, and a lot of other places in the world. Whee! So, bring back your rolling backpack, please. Would it be easier if you rolled it up a ramp or if you rolled it up the stairs? The ramp would be the right answer. You probably would know why. Third, the wedge. Wedges are basically triangular objects that make your work easier. Well, that's the point about simple machines. Examples include an axe, a shovel, and ice picks, and also this. So, I can't get this out with my entire hand, right? So I use this, and it's a wedge, and I take it out easily. See? It's a wedge. Doorstops are considered wedges, but they aren't sharp unlike the rest of the wedges. This wasn't sharp either, though. Fourth, the lever. Now, you may be thinking about the classic Minecraft lever you have to always flip to get into your secret base, but no. And there are 3 main types of levers, and those are: number 1 is a first-class lever. So, a first-class lever is like a seesaw. A fulcrum is somewhere close to the center, and it's like a point where the board gets up and down with. The load is the thing you want to lift up. The effort is where pressure is being applied, so when you're pushing down on the seesaw. Second-class levers are like wheelbarrows. The fulcrum is actually the wheels, and the load is up front with the effort at the back. Third-class levers are kind of like your body holding something you really hate and is disgusting, like a bag of garbage. The fulcrum is your body, the effort is your arm holding the garbage, and the load, which you're holding and want to throw in a volcano right now. Fifth, the pulley. Pulleys can be found in wells, elevators, and cranes. Pulleys work best when you're trying to get that thing, which is way down there, up here. A pulley is like a wheel with a rope around it, and when you pull or let go of the rope slightly, you can make the object attached to it go up or down. The last but not least, screws. Now, you probably know how a screw looks like. Screws can fasten or unfasten things, and they're really helpful, like the rest of the simple machines. Yeah, all of them are helpful. Thanks for watching. Can you find simple machines around you?
Yeah, very cool, right? And last but not least, how could we end without our lovely, wait, hold on, where is it? Our last meme of the day. Screwed! What would you be if you were attached to another object by an inclined plane wrapped around helically around an axis? And these are our sources. Thank you for coming today, and I will hope to see you next time as well. Bye.
Okay, so welcome back to chemistry. Last week we did a little bit of delving deep into reactions, and then this week we'll come back to the last couple terms in reactions that you basically need to know for chemistry. So first, starting with something called a net ionic equation, right? So last week we learned the molecular equation, which is this picture down at the bottom, right? So to know how to do a net ionic equation, first you need to know the 4 labels of states of matter next to each molecule. So if you see up here in this picture, next to each atom molecule, there's like a parentheses with like A, Q, S, L, or G in there. So corresponding S is a solid, right? L is a liquid, G is a gas. That's the first letter of, the word. And the last one, AQ. AQ is an aqueous solution. That means that, like, let's say if you had sugar and you like stirred it into water, it disappears. That would be an aqueous solution of the sugar molecule. So for example, right, we have the NaClAQ. So there is Na plus ions and Cl minus ions in a solution. So why we would do it that way is because the Na and the Cl, after dissolving, is actually separated from each other. So if you look at this complete ionic equation right here, you see how up here PbNO32 is in an aqueous solution. And down here in the complete ionic equation, we have Pb2 plus and 2NO3 minus. So these two are now separated. That's called the complete ionic equation, which means you separate the ions away from each other and write it all like that. So from molecular to complete ionic, you have one more step to get to the net ionic equation. So a net ionic equation, you're basically getting rid of every aqueous solution in the products. So like over here, this 2K plus AQ and 2NO3 minus AQ, these are going to get canceled out, right? And also if you have any like repeating elements, like over maybe on the reactant side, you'd have like a Na plus, and then on the product side, you have an Na plus, they would get removed. You really only need just the two parts that add up to either a solid, liquid, or gas in the product side. So you look at from complete ionic equation to net ionic equation, you realize the only things you have left is a Pb2 plus, 2I minus, and then a Pbi2 solid. So that's all you need for the net ionic equation. As for why we need net ionic equations, we'll be going over that next. So there are some experiments in chemistry that are involved in finding like the mass of the tiny bit of solid that is created in a reaction. So for example, there's a very common experiment that we would do where we mix two solids together and then we filter out the liquid. And what is remaining left in the filter will be the solid that doesn't pass through, right? So up here is like a coffee filter, which you like pour water through. And then what's remaining is like a bunch of solids. So in that situation, right, all of the aqueous solutions have fallen to the bottom of the beaker. That's like the useless stuff. We don't need it. So all we need is the solid remaining. So in that situation, you're not going to want to use the actual complete molecular equation. You're going to want to use this net ionic equation for easier solving to find like the mass of the solid. And then we'll calculate that with stoichiometry. We've mentioned this briefly in the past. I don't know if you remember, but today we're going to go into it a little deeper. So under stoichiometry, right, if you might remember, stoichiometry is the calculation of mole ratios of a chemical equation. So what does that mean, right? You look on the periodic table. This is a pretty bad example of a periodic table. It's missing the mole ratio, but usually there's going to be like a number. It's a number with like 2 decimal places behind it. That's going to be its mole ratio. It's in the units of grams over moles, right? So using a conversion factor, if you look up here, right, you have 2 grams of hydrogen chloride, HCl, and then you would multiply by like the sum of H plus Cl, which would be on a periodic table. That's a better example than this. And then you would have the moles over grams for the conversion factors, right? That's how you convert from grams to moles. This is very important for stoichiometry because you're looking at the mole ratios or the coefficients in front of each of these molecules. So for example, we look at the equation from earlier, from here, this one up at the top. 2 Ag plus aqueous plus S2 minus aqueous yield Ag2S solid. So in this situation, right, unlike this example in the top right corner, we have a coefficient of 2 in front of the Ag. So in that situation, you'll have to have 2 moles of Ag multiplied by 1 mole of Ag2S divided by 2 moles of Ag plus. In this situation, you'll realize that if you had 2 moles of Ag, you would end with 1 mole of Ag2S. So from there, you can use the moles or you can calculate the grams, whatever the question asks you to do. This is just finding a calculator and typing numbers into it. And that will be all for today. Next week, we will continue on a different topic, but reactions are the most important part of chemistry. Literally everything in chemistry ties to reactions. So make sure if you ever need to review this week's lesson and then review the lesson from last time, which is like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. And thank you.